You are listening to Crime Unraveled, a Buck Taylor novel by Chuck Morgan.
Chapter 32. Buck was halfway over Cottonwood Pass when his phone chimed. He looked at the number and hit the talk button on the dashboard. Entertainment Center. Afternoon. What the hell have you gotten yourself into this time? Eco-terrorists. Fuck Buck, said Hank Clancy. Hank Clancy was the special agent in charge of the Denver field office of the FBI and one of Buck's closest friends. Hank had been a deputy director until earlier in the year when he fell on his sword and took the blame for a rogue FBI agent. The agent, while working out of the Denver field office and fighting Buck at every turn during the investigation of the Christmas Day bombings, caused the deaths of several FBI agents and serious injuries to many others. Buck had asked the Colorado governor to intervene on Hank's behalf, and as a result, they were able to save his job, but they couldn't prevent the demotion. Hank had a long career with the FBI and was involved in many high-profile cases. And even though his wife wanted him to retire, Hank refused to end his career with a black eye. Buck laughed. Not too sure. What do you mean? The governor held a press conference and said so. What's going on, Buck? Buck filled him in on what they knew so far. Hank listened without interrupting. Buck stopped to take a sip of Coke from the bottle in the cup holder. So if not terrorists, then what? Not sure yet, said Buck. I've dealt with eco-terrorists before. This feels like something different. After Buck's wife passed away, he had been called to investigate a fire at a controversial hunting lodge that was being blamed on eco-terrorists. The lodge had been set on fire, Buck later learned, to cover up the murder of a DEA agent, and the lodge fire led to one of the worst wildfires in Colorado history. Buck's investigation led to a group of survivalists selling counterfeit drugs and a billionaire whose companies were pumping hazardous waste into fracking wells. When all was said and done, it had nothing to do with eco-terrorists and was all about the money. How so? Asked Hank. No upside. What would they hope to gain by blowing up a highway and flooding a canyon? The slide caused more ecological damage to the canyon than the highway ever could. I don't see it. Okay, say you're right, said Hank. Who would stand to gain by closing the highway and flooding the canyon? That's what's got me stuck, said Buck. Well, and this is just me spitballing, but what did the landslide do to the canyon? What's different about the canyon today than last week before the slide? Buck thought for a minute. Rocks and water? Right, said Hank, but the canyon always had rocks and water. What's different now? Buck thought about the little piece of rock in his pocket that Jeremy Ratzenberger had given him. The slide did two things, said Buck. It created a reservoir in a state ravaged by drought and loosened up the entire top of a mountain. Why? Asked Hank. Rare earth metals. What the hell are you talking about? Asked Hank. Buck told him about the piece of rare earth metal that Ratzenberger found in the slide area. He also told him about the RDX found in the dirt in the tunnel. Now you're getting somewhere, said Hank. I'm no mining expert, but I bet it's a lot cheaper to pull minerals out of a rock pile than mine for them. Now you need to figure out who benefits. Yeah, and figure out who needs a lot of water, said Buck. What do you need from me? Asked Hank. I'm waiting for the ATF to get back to me with information on who purchased RDX in this area. Can you push them a little? No problem, Buck. I'll put a couple of my folks on it as well. Stay safe and call if you need anything else. Buck disconnected the call and his phone chimed. He checked the number and answered. Doctor, I was just talking to someone about you. I hope it was a pleasant conversation, Agent Taylor. Listen, are you anywhere near the east side of the slide area? I'm pulling into Gypsum now. What's up? Can you meet us at the tunnel? Something I'd like to show you. No problem, Doc. I'll be there in a few minutes. Buck disconnected and turned onto I-70 westbound. He pulled up to the barricade and presented his ID to the trooper on duty. The trooper moved a section of the barricade and Buck pulled through. He drove a couple of miles and stopped outside the tunnel entrance. He slid out of the Jeep, grabbed his backpack and hard hat and walked into the tunnel. He met Todd and Jeremy at the west end. He noticed the water behind the rock slide was only inches from the roadway. "Okay, Doc. What's going on?" "Whoever caused this landslide had a specific purpose in mind," said Jeremy. "It's hard to see now that a large chunk of the mountain is in the canyon, but think of the sidewalls of the canyon as a layer cake. Various layers of different types of rocks have piled on top of each other over millennia, all with different densities and properties. It's kind of like different types of snow falling on the mountains, one layer wet, one layer dry, and so on until you have the perfect avalanche setup. Take that layer cake and tilt it about 35 to 40 degrees towards the river. Lots of pressure on those layers to stay where they were. Now place a massive explosive charge at the bottom of that slope. The concussive force of the explosion cracks the softer or more brittle layers, and then gravity does the rest. Whoever placed those charges knew exactly where to put them." "Okay," said Buck, not sure where this was going. "But why bring down the mountain?" "To get to the metals without having to mine them. This canyon is full of rare earth metals. In the short time we've been here, we found 5 of the 17 rare earth metals. That's incredible. If what we've seen is only a part of the find, this could be the largest collection of rare earth metals ever found. It's worth billions and would put the United States ahead of the Chinese in rare earth metal production. Because these metals are now accessible without the high mining costs, they can be produced cheaper and faster. All someone has to do is shovel them up and extract them from the rocks. Someone is going to make a ton of money." The ground shook, and Buck looked up at what was left of the sidewall of the canyon with concern in his eyes. "Don't worry, Agent Taylor. Everything above us is stable. More stable than it's ever been," said Dr. Ratzenberger. "Then what's the vibration?" asked Buck. "There's a long line of dump trucks on the other side of the slide, along with heavy-duty cranes and earth-moving equipment. They're starting to take down the rock slide. It is a monumental task, to say the least. We spoke to one of the workers, and the governor wants them to create a spillway. If the water gets much higher, the town of Dotsero will be forced to evacuate." "Okay, Doc," said Buck. "Thanks for the geology lesson. Makes things a little clearer." He looked at the water lapping at the road. "You guys had better clear out before you have to swim out of here." They shook hands, and Buck headed back through the tunnel to his Jeep. He slid in and headed back towards Gypsum. He needed to talk to Rodney's boss. He exited the highway and followed an unmarked road for 10 miles north of town till he came to a 12-foot-tall chain-link fence topped by a roll of concertina wire. It looked like a prison. The sign on the gate read Roger Burns and Sons. There was nothing to indicate this was a demolition company. The large steel gate containing numerous warning placards was closed, but the smaller door to the side of the gate stood open. Buck thought that was odd. He parked the Jeep, slid out, walked up to the security panel and pushed the call button. He could hear it ringing, but no one answered. The little bug in his brain started dancing around. He walked to the back of his Jeep, opened the hatch and pulled out his ballistic vest. He slipped it on, opened the gun safe welded to the floor of his Jeep, and pulled out a backup pistol and holster which he strapped to his thigh. He loaded a couple extra magazines, closed the hatch, and walked through the gate. From their background check on Rodney and Boomer, Buck had learned that Roger Burns and Sons was one of the largest and most respected demolition companies in the world, which seemed not to fit the small concrete building that sat in front of him. The only thing indicating it was an office was the sign above the door that read "Visitors Sign In Here." Buck grabbed the handle and found that the door was locked. He walked around the building, but there were very few windows, all several feet off the ground. He completed his circuit and looked at the 2 vehicles parked next to the building. Both were locked. He looked at the huge steel warehouse several hundred feet away, but no workers were visible. Buck was on high alert. A warehouse that size should have a large crew working in it, but only 2 other trucks were in the lot. He returned to the front door, removed a brown folder from his back pocket and pulled out 2 lockpicks. He worked on the lock for a few seconds, put away the picks and pulled out his pistol. Buck pushed the door open, and the coppery smell of blood filled the air. "Police, show yourself." No response. He stepped through the door, closed and locked it. He wasn't sure what was going on, but he didn't want anyone to come in behind him. Leading with his pistol, he looked behind the small counter in what must have been a reception area. He stepped around the counter and pushed open the office door. The body of a young man was lying on the floor behind the desk. There was a bullet wound in his right hand and his face. It looked to Buck like the victim had raised his hand to protect himself, the bullet going through his hand first. Buck backtracked out of the office and walked to the second office door. He pushed open the door and found an older man lying on the floor alongside the desk. There was a wound in his back and a lot of blood under his head. Buck backed out of the office, walked through the reception area and opened the door. He stepped outside and pulled out his phone. Sheriff Al Hartman answered his phone. "Hey Buck. What's up?" "Al, I'm gonna need backup forensics and your pathologist. I'm at Roger Burns and Sons Demolition." "Shit Buck. You guys are keeping me busy. Bax just called with the same request, but she's up at an old mine with 2 dead bodies and a couple of burned-up SUVs." Buck's phone chimed, and he looked at the number. "Bax is calling me. I'll wait for your guys here." He switched calls. "I just heard. Give me the details." He listened, disconnected the call and dialed the director. This case had taken a turn, and it wasn't a good turn.
Thank you for listening to this chapter of Crime Unraveled, a Buck Taylor novel by Chuck Morgan. You can find the entire crime series as well as other novels by Chuck Morgan at chuckmorganbooks.com or on Amazon.